You're tuned to Warsaw. Welcome to Focus Cultural Magazine, and your host is Elżbieta Krajewska. Agent Zoe, the untold story of fearless World War II resistance fighter Elżbieta Zawacka by Clare Mulley, told of the only woman who was one of the legendary silent unseen of the Polish armed forces who carried out more than 100 extremely dangerous courier missions in wartime Europe and later fought in the Warsaw Uprising. Zoe was the code name of Elżbieta Zawacka, and her story, first published in the UK a year ago, the story of World War II agent Zoe, has just seen the premiere of its Polish edition.
My name is Clare Mulley. I'm a historian of the female experience in the Second World War.
How did you start on this subject?
About 30-something years ago, I taught English as a volunteer in Bydgoszcz. It opened up my eyes, my understanding. I went to the museum there and I saw the history and I saw the geography of the place. You know, Warsaw is about halfway between Moscow and Berlin, and it's the cause of so much history. So I became very interested, and in my first degree, which was international politics and history, I looked a little at the Polish experience then and became more interested. So when I started writing, my first book was an English woman, a real heroine in the First World War. And when that book did quite well, suddenly I had a publisher saying, "What are you going to do next?" I said, well, I'm very interested in the female experience because I think often when it's been told it's been romanticised. I think we need to talk about these women's achievements, how effective they were, not just what they looked like. And I'm interested in the Polish experience, so that's what led me to Krystyna Skarbek.
And Elżbieta Zawacka?
Elżbieta Zawacka, I first heard her name in the Polish embassy. I was at an event, it was wonderful. I was being given the Bene Merito, a Republic of Poland Cultural Award, which is a great honour. And I met a lady there who was a veteran of the Second World War, the Warsaw Uprising. She had served as a teenager, Hanna Czarnocka. And she said, wonderful that you are being recognised for your work on Krystyna Skarbek, but why didn't you write about the real hero? Why didn't you write about Zoe? And I had to say, who's Zoe? I'd never heard of her name. So that's how I came across that story.
How does one become a wartime agent? These women were quite young at the time when they became involved in the resistance.
Some of the women were very young, but Zoe was not that young. She was born in 1909, so she's already 30 at the start of the war. And she had, before the war, she joined the Women's Military Auxiliary in Poland, WSK. And so she was very highly trained, actually. She knew how to fire a gun, she knew about emergency medicine, she could drive a military vehicle, a tank. So she was very well prepared, and she actually had orders to undertake in the eventuality of an invasion of Poland, and she was staying at a Polish airbase on the 1st of September 1939. So she was actually one of the very first women to serve in the Second World War because she immediately went into action.
What particularly interested you in her story?
There is so much. I mean, she is the first and the only. She is the only woman that I found to be the emissary of an Allied army commander. General Grotrovetsky of the RK made her his personal emissary. She is the only woman to reach London from Warsaw, travelling overland with 2 microfilm of vital information and 2 missions to undertake in Britain. And of course, she's the only woman to parachute back from Britain behind enemy lines into Nazi German occupied Poland. And the other thing that I found really fascinating about her is, apart from her incredible achievements and her dramatic story, is that she keeps on fighting. This is not a story that ends with the end of the Second World War. She keeps on serving, really, fighting for a free Poland. And of course, she is arrested by the communist regime.
Yeah, that's a terrible part of the story for many of our resistance fighters from the Second World War. But how difficult were those missions she undertook? She was a woman. How difficult would they have been for men?
They were incredibly difficult for men or women. They are soldiers together. The first, women had a slight advantage, I think, because the misogynistic German society did not anticipate that women would play a strategic role in the war, that they would have the impetus and the courage to do this very perilous work. I think women were overlooked to an extent and underestimated. So early on in the war, Zoe recruited all women, 200 women within a month, to gather military information. Women who were working as secretaries or cleaners in the German occupying authorities' offices. They could overhear conversations navigation, look at the papers on the tables and the maps, women whose apartments overlooked the railway lines on the main thoroughfares, who could look at the movement of military freight and troop movements. All this is very important information. And the Germans didn't really expect women to be doing this kind of work. So they had a slight advantage, but when the Germans realised what the women were doing, their response was invariably very brutal. So the women faced the exact same mortal threat that the men did.
We know that Christine used her, she was a very attractive woman, and she used this charm of hers also in her work, so to say. Did Zoe do the same, or was she just a different character simply?
Christina did on occasion use her charm, but this was just one of the skills, one of the things that she had. She also used her incredible courage, her very quick thinking. It's not all about charm, and in fact, if you are a pretty face, that can be a problem for you in your service because it makes your face more memorable for the enemy. So in fact, it's not always helpful, and Christina would often try to blend into the background and disappear in society as well. I think we overemphasise the importance of her appearance. Zoe, she is a very different kind of character. She sees herself very much as a soldier, and in fact she secured legal military status of women as soldiers in the AK. That's one of her achievements. So she is trying much more consistently to blend into society. She travels on very well forged, Polish forged papers, often pretending to be a German oil company secretary. So sort of travelling under the radar in that regard.
It also requires quite a lot of athletic effort, which one doesn't really associate with women, well, in a misogynistic society at any time.
I think women, in Britain, the women's football team are champions of the world. The women's rugby team are champions. We see women as very athletic.
Very good football team as well.
I'm sure you do, and fantastic. But yes, it does require a lot of fitness. For example, when Zoe has to cross nearly 1,000 miles of enemy-occupied territory from Warsaw to London, that involves her leaping from a train at one point, a moving train going through the night. And
James Bond would be jealous.
Yeah, I mean, better than James Bond because she's real. She has to hike across the high Pyrenees, and at one point they are shot at in the freezing mountain passes by German border patrols. She hides in the water tender of Pierre Laval's train. He's the collaborationist Prime Minister of France at that point. So she's climbing in and out of this water tender in the middle of the night. So yes, it takes a lot of physical effort as well as strength of mind and purpose.
Is there anything in this story which really astonished you? I mean, listening to all those exploits, one is astonished anyway, but something that was really, really out of orbit.
I mean, all of it. There's hardly a chapter here where she isn't a hair's breadth from being caught by the Gestapo at one point. The moment when she leaps from a train, the moment when she is the only woman to parachute back to Poland. And actually, she's vulnerable. She's terrified of heights. That's one of the few things that did, create her to go red in the face and break out in a sweat. And yet she does it anyhow. For me, that's true courage, when you're scared but you do it anyhow because duty calls. So yes, leaping from a plane in the middle of the night is a terrifying prospect. A British Halifax bomber, a big aircraft that had to fly through enemy flak, which would have hit the metal fuselage of her plane, and still they pressed on, and she went back to serve in the Warsaw Uprising. But I think the thing that shocked me most was the post-war story. That, she's one of the first women to serve. She serves throughout the war. She serves in the Warsaw Uprising. She survives and is never arrested by the Germans, and yet is arrested by the communist regime in Poland after the war. And I think the other thing that I find really surprising in this story is, given how extraordinary she was, given the extent of her achievements, why don't we know her name? Why have we not heard of this woman? That's, I found, perhaps most shocking of all.
I think something of those stories is now coming to be more of public knowledge. But yes, we have all these wonderful, wonderful women in Polish history, and yet we need a British writer to be writing about them.
Well, I'm sure there are fantastic Polish historians also working in this area, and for me it's been a real privilege to tell this story. But isn't it fantastic if you can reach a new audience outside of Poland as well? You know, I've just come back from America promoting the American edition of this book, and I was given a very warm welcome from the Polish communities in America, but also the Harvard Club and the International Spy Museum, and I'm about to speak in the Second World War Museum in New Orleans, and they have never heard this woman's name before, and they are now embracing this history. So if I can be a vehicle for this story to reach a wider audience, then I am delighted.
Any more plans about extraordinary Polish women agents in the future?
I would love to write more. When I was writing this book on Elżbieta Zawacka, she actually served alongside this group of incredible women like Emilia Melesa, Zofia Franio. There's so many of them, and often their stories start before the First World War. They served in different battles in Polish history as well, and I think there is a lot to be told here. But my next book is looking in a different area. There is at least one more Polish story, possibly two, that I would like to tell if I can get the publisher interest.
Yes, I was thinking about her post-war history as well. How sad is that? How did she come to terms with it?
I think because she never stopped fighting for what she thought was right. She would speak always. Her life is about service and duty as well. Although she's quite a funny character as well. She often tells a funny story, so she's got a lot of lightness in her story as well. But I think what kept her going was the fight for her country, and so she continues in the post-war period. She's arrested in 1951, sentenced to 10 years in prison. But even in prison, she helps to educate the other, mainly younger women who are also being detained, because a lot of them have missed out on 6 years of education. So she keeps their spirits up. She keeps them having a sense of purpose and dignity. So this is very inspiring. She's released after 6 years, actually, and then she wants to help rebuild her country. She works in education. She helps to set up sort of long-distance learning through radio and correspondence, but she is continually hounded and put under surveillance. She's arrested again in 1976, and then in 1976 again, and later they try to arrest her a third time, but she slips away. But she realises that the narrative of the war that is being told is the communist narrative. It's not the story that she recognises from her own experience. So she secretly or clandestinely then begins to record this history. She interviews the survivors. She's an academic. She does it very thoroughly. And she keeps all these on slips of paper in her handwriting, which we still have, hidden inside her cupboards in her communist-era apartment block. And again, the state puts her under surveillance. But only because she did this work do we now have this record of the Pomeranian people and also the women who served and their contributions. And I couldn't have written this book without her work to preserve that history. So this is another battle she fought. And then she supported Solidarity and so on. So, yeah.
Actually, it's still a better story than the end of Christine Grenville. Horrible, tragic.
Yes, it was very distressing when I found out what happened to Christina Skarbek in London, and I actually applied under the Freedom of Information Act and got out files that hadn't been seen surrounding the court case, the medical reports and the police reports on that tragedy. Yes, it's. I don't think, though. I think it's more important we don't try and focus on. Not many female special agents are murdered for love. This was a crime of passion. But I don't think we should focus on the tragedy of Christina's story, because actually her life was very fulfilled. She achieved so much on her own. She secured the defection of an entire Nazi German garrison in the Alps. She saved the lives of many of the men she worked alongside. Extraordinary achievements. We should remember the women like this for their heroism and how effective they were in the service of their nations.
And still inspiration for not only women in the 21st century.
Absolutely, yes. I've just been interviewed, and the chap said, I will get my daughters to read this book. And I said, yes, and get your sons to read it as well, because we all need to know this history. It's Polish history, it's women's history, but it doesn't belong on a separate shelf over there somewhere. This is shared history, men and women's history. It's history of the Allies as well. We all need to understand it and be inspired.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for this conversation.
It's been a pleasure. Dziękuję bardzo.
Elżbieta Zawacka died in 2009 at the age of 99 in her home city of Toruń. I was talking to Clare Mulley, author of Agent Zoe, the untold story of fearless World War II resistance fighter Elżbieta Zawacka, just published in its Polish version. And that's it in Focus magazine. Your host was Elżbieta Krajewska. Thanks for listening and goodbye.